It's time for another episode of I Am Northwest Arkansas, the podcast covering the intersection of business, culture, entrepreneurship, and life in general here in the Ozarks. Whether you are considering a move to this area or trying to learn more about the place you call home, we've got something special for you. Here's our host, Randy Wilburn.
Hey folks, and welcome back to another episode of I Am Northwest Arkansas. I'm your host, Randy Wilburn, and I'm excited to be with you today as I'm always. I'm sitting here in the Furman Garner Performance Studio at KUAF 91.3 FM, the only public radio station here in Northwest Arkansas. Really appreciate the partnership with this organization and all that they represent in our community. And so as I continue to wax philosophical about the confluence of entrepreneurship, business, culture, and life here in the Ozarks. I love being able to use KUAF as a home base to tell the stories that we get to tell. And so today's episode is no different than any of the others that I've done here. One of the things, and I've shared this before, I always like telling the stories, founder stories of companies that have either started here in Northwest Arkansas or moved to Northwest Arkansas, because it is a fertile ground for entrepreneurship, because it is a great opportunity to grow an idea from a seedling to something big. And so my next guest, which I'm sure as they're listening to me, they're probably like, yes, I hope that's us. But my next guest is certainly no exception to this rule. They have decided to come here to Northwest Arkansas for a lot of the opportunities that exist here for their business. And so without further ado, I want to welcome Demi, Yuan, and Ayush Thakur from FR8relay. And they have a really great company. And when we originally met, I believe Demi heard me speak at a 1 Million Cups event up in Bentonville. Shout out to 1 Million Cups and Startup Junkie for hosting that wonderful event on a regular basis every Wednesday morning, I believe, up in Bentonville. So certainly you should make yourself available to that. I'll put a link in the show notes for 1 Million Cups. But today, we're here to talk about FR8relay. And so, Demi, Ayush, how are you guys doing today?
Well, thanks.
Pretty good.
Excited to be here.
Good. Well, I'm glad you're here. No, seriously, I'd love for you just to kind of give our audience a little bit about your background. And we call it a superhero origin story, right? Because we all have one. But I would love to give your background. And you don't have to go all the way back to diapers, but just go back to a time when you were starting to foment the entrepreneurial muscle that you continue to exercise on a regular basis. And either one of you can jump in and kind of tell us a little bit about that.
I think actually, Ayush, you should start because that's where the idea came from.
Okay, awesome. So, not going back to diapers. That's a good point of reference there. I would say I won't say journey, but my inclination or interest in entrepreneurship started with my mom. She was a housewife for most of my life. She was a teacher also for elementary school kids for a bit. But she put her entire energy in raising two boys from both of us. And she was always interested in doing things that, seemed exciting to her.
Yeah.
And she used to put us in like plays, and she would write plays, and like she would put performances, and then she would also set up shops selling homemade food at fairs. And that's where I feel like it was my first peek into that, because I would get a little pocket money out of that. So that was my motivation to work for her. But she was a tough boss, and she would make us do everything from chopping veggies to being at the cash counter and being very precise with the countings and making sure customers are getting like napkins and chutneys and all the condiments that go along with the food. And so that's kind of how I grew up, going to fairs maybe once a year with her.
Yeah.
And doing a 2-day setup there. And then kind of graduated and started doing it myself in my school. So our school had these Diwali, that's a big festival in India.
Yep.
So we would have a festival and a celebration, and kids would be allowed to set up shops. And I think I would set up different shops each year, but the year I made most money was when I set up a gambling shop, which was basically spin the wheel.
Yeah.
And I realized if the sections are really small, then you get more. So so that's kind of how I started, then kind of moved into studies, focused on that for a bit, did my bachelor's in India, wanted to go for higher education, so applied for my master's. It's 2010, so it was just recession time.
Sure.
So,
rough time.
Yeah, so I got admission into 3 different schools, UC Davis, USF, and I think one in Chicago. And USF was the only one that was giving me full funding. So they gave me full funding and full tuition and also an assistantship. That was the only reason I was able to come. And so I moved here, graduated from my master's, worked in private sector for a bit, but this bug had always been inside me. Like, okay, I want to do something that is not like 9 to 5. Well, it's not more about the timing, but it's more about the creativity, creating something new that is not out there, that is different, unique. That's what I've always been motivated by. And in grad school, fortunately, unfortunately, whatever you want to call it, I ended up on a project working for Florida Department of Transportation. And that project was about trucks and the data collected from trucks. So that's how I got to learn a lot about trucks. And, coming from India, the whole industry is different. The operation style is different. So it was very interesting to learn. And that led me to eventually file a patent, which I got in 2018. So once I had the patent out, I was like, okay, now I can safely, think about pursuing this because I have some sort of anchor that, I can come back to and point to like, hey, this is a patent. It's a patent by definition means something unique, and I want to build a business around it. So that comes to 2016. I had talked to Demi before that. We got married in 2015, met in 2013. I told her that, hey, I want to do this. And have been thinking about this for a while, but I wanted to gain some work experience first so people don't say, hey, you don't know anything and you are just trying to do something very specific in transportation. So I built up some experience, wrote some papers, got published, all that stuff. And I said, okay, now I have decent enough background so I can start as an entrepreneur with domain expertise. So I jumped in, asked Demi to eventually join, and she graciously accepted. And so that's how we started. So from there, registering company, running around. So it's a whole fun story beyond that. But that's the origin story.
That's the origin story. I got you. And Demi, growing up, did you have an entrepreneurial streak in you?
No, I did not. I mean, other than like lemonade stands and selling tickets to homemade plays, that was just not my deal. I did not see myself as until, this company, I've never saw myself as an entrepreneur, as a business person, as, I use technology, but not as I never envisioned owning a tech company or being in the trucking industry. Ayush, I don't know if he mentioned this, but he is a civil engineer by trade and specifically concentrating in transportation. So my background is in nonprofits. My bachelor's, I majored in sociology with a minor in Asian studies.
Yeah.
I worked in the nonprofit sector before I went back and got my master's in social work with a focus in leadership for organizational development, and was really, saw my dream jobs as these like social justice, community organizing, leadership development with underserved communities. Really in a lot of jobs that were very like female dominated, or not gender nonconforming. And so I loved my work, but as many people know who have worked or have people they love who have worked in under-resourced nonprofit organizations, I burned out a few times over time. And after Ayush and I got married in 2015, when he told me I was doing what I love, but when he told me that he got a job offer that was in Nashville and we were living in Denver, my family's mostly in Colorado, I didn't hesitate to say, I've had these jobs that I've loved. You've been wanting to spread your wings further. You should take it. And I wasn't, even though it was sad to leave my community, I was ready for a change myself.
Yeah.
and thought that I was, I finished out my programming commitments for 6 months. So we lived apart for that time. But when I moved to Tennessee, Nashville at first, I thought this is my chance to find a next nonprofit that has some more work-life balance. I don't know if that exists, but I was doing a lot of freelance work at that time. And Ayush said, I'm glad that I'm getting this public sector experience. He had been with a private firm in Denver doing a consulting firm worked on a lot of government projects.
Sure.
But he had left kind of the golden handcuffs there to work as a senior freight planner at the Tennessee Department of Transportation in Nashville. And he was like, I'm getting this public sector experience, but I don't quite have enough time that I want to in order to start up this company. And he knew that I was kind of like the wear all the hats in a small nonprofit organized person. So he asked me if I could part-time help him with this company. And I said, sure, no problem. Like, it's not my domain expertise, but I'm very organized and great at setting up processes and goals. And this was just temporary. But not long after, Ayush got our first angel investor on board. And with that early money, as he mentioned, it was actually 3 contractors that we didn't get what we needed for the money that we paid them. And so when his buddy said, come back home to India, start your own software development company here, then it became more real. And we both went full time on it at that point. So yeah, it was not my vision. And there's a whole lot more,
Well, I mean, and certainly there's always that dynamic of couples that work together, right?
Yes.
And sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's not. And maybe it's easier or maybe it's harder when, it's like one person's dream is shared by the other in the sense that this is what they wanted to do, but you didn't have a background in logistics.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't like you woke up and were like, oh my gosh, I see freight relay in my head. That was really Ayush's thing,
yes.
But you kind of add to it, right? You're the secret sauce that has helped Ayush to kind of bring this to light. Is that a fair assessment?
That's fair. We are very different people. We have very different styles and we complement each other.
Yeah.
So yes, as you said, it's not always easy because we have very different styles. I'm a very process person. Ayush is impulsive but visionary and can move me out of my ruts of thinking and out of my comfort zone. But then I can also help us execute on some of the areas that
timelines.
Yeah, timelines.
Yeah.
So it is like that. And I would say Ayush is he's a very smart guy. And he knew that so when we're talking, we haven't really talked about what the technology does yet, but this technology and system has the potential to create real social impact, to improve human lives, particularly for truck drivers and their families, in addition to all the other value propositions. And so the turning point, when he suggested this company, me helping him with this company, he handed me a book by a sociologist named Steve Viselli. And it's basically a book that goes deep into the details of the working conditions of the modern day truck driver.
Wow.
And just
to add one thing there, this guy was a professor. He quit his job or
he was a
sabbatical.
PhD student.
Oh yeah, he was a PhD student. He took a sabbatical or whatever, got a CDL license,
and started driving a truck.
He drove around for
so
a bit.
He walked the walk and really
to gather information for his research, and then came back and wrote everything.
How long did he go out on the road for?
It was less than a year, which is the case for the majority of new entrants into truck driving.
I love that.
It's it depends on the year and the size of the company, but the low end estimate is 80% of new truck drivers who enter the market leaves the job within the first year.
Yeah.
So
so now that we've got the groundwork laid out and you guys have gone from Denver, USF to Nashville, you worked with TDOT. I always like to say TDOT, but you worked with TDOT and you decided, hey, I'm going to start this business. I see some needs in the trucking industry that have not been met. For the lay listener that's listening to this podcast, could you kind of maybe talk about some of the specific challenges in the trucking industry? Just give us a small glimpse into it. Because a lot of times I don't think people think about how much their daily lives are impacted by whether or not a truck can make it to a distribution facility that will then get whatever package you've ordered from Amazon or Walmart or whomever to your house. Mm-hmm. And so, we always talk about the last mile, but there's something that happens before you get to that last mile, right? Mm-hmm. And the last mile is just a reference to like all of the different companies that deliver that last few miles of a package from a distribution center or a FedEx type center to your physical home. So I would love for you just to give our audience just a quick synopsis of what are the challenges that truckers today are facing.
Yeah, so just to give you a little background on that as well. Transportation is usually, it's present everywhere, but no one thinks about it. Like you use things that are being developed by transportation engineers and planners every day, like your roads, traffic lights, the signal, how long the signals are. No one thinks about, all that stuff, who is doing it, who is putting those numbers in there when you're counting down. No one thinks about that, but those things are something we interact daily. Coming to trucking, every single thing that you have in your house, unless you are growing cotton and then building, your own shirt and things like that, unless you are doing that and, dyeing it and, having a leather, like an animal and all that stuff, everything that you buy comes from a store. And the things that supply to the store are trucks. Those are the trucks that would bring in supplies from wherever they are being produced. If you think of produce, California does a lot of stuff. Florida has a lot of stuff. Texas. All these things are moving. Arkansas is big in produce, and all those things that are produced on the agricultural land needs to move, needs to be packed, and needs to be delivered to the final location. And that's just one aspect. And then there's a whole supply chain around the things that we import from outside. So this is something that is so critical part of our daily lives, and it's being done by the truck drivers who are on the road 24/7. You drive on any major interstates, you will see trucks. If you go to any gas station, you will see trucks parked there. And it's a really tough life for these guys. Yeah.
So one of the pieces is that truck drivers are limited to 11 hours behind the wheel per day. They can be on duty for 14 hours per day. But
now, let me ask you a question, because I've always wondered this. Are there ways to skirt that? I mean, is there
there used to be.
There used to be.
Yeah. So before 2017, drivers were required to maintain a physical logbook. So they would enter the start time, the end time. The regulation to drive 11 hours has been around for a while.
Yeah.
But the enforcement was that, hey, just show us a logbook when someone stops you and then you're good to go. So most of the drivers, small companies, owner-operators, and they constitute about 90%. So 90% of the companies, trucking companies in the space are less than 6 trucks.
Yeah.
So these are mom-and-pop operations who are usually, trying to maximize their time on the road, and they would have 2 separate logbooks, one for inspection and one for actually billing their clients. And that's where the government, FMCSA, Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, they came in and said, no longer. We won't accept physical logbooks anymore. You need to install a device called ELD, electronic logging device. Mm-hmm. That is something that plugs into the truck engine.
Yep.
And then it would record how long it's on and how long it was on for and how many miles were driven.
So, and I've seen, like when you come into Oklahoma, they have those things over the road. Is that what those things are registering, or is...
No. So those things that you see on the road for measuring the height or measuring the weight, those are on the whenever you enter a state.
Yeah.
Each state has a set number of roads, right? And set number of miles of that. And trucks are heavy, so they break the roads.
Mm-hmm.
So to monitor how much weight they are allowing on their roads and how much tax they can charge, they put these kind of monitoring stations at the exits of each state. So wherever you go, you'll find them.
Okay.
So that's what they do. But this is essentially something that drivers are responsible for themselves. So they need to plug it in. They need to either have an app or an electronic device, which they can pull up when an inspector shows up and show them that, hey, I've been driving less than 11 hours.
So there's no way to fudge it anymore. And that was a huge pain point in the beginning when it was introduced, because there are so many, as you were talking about just a moment ago, we can go into the hardships that drivers experience in trying to work in a system that isn't really set up for sustainable health of these folks.
Yeah.
So they can't fudge those logs anymore. And they can only, they have a maximum number of time that they're allowed to spend on the road. Now, I'll just say for a moment, like the majority of trucking out there is done by a solo driver. There are a few other like models that cost more money. If you have 2 drivers in the cab, they take turns sleeping and driving. That's called team driving. And that's generally used for really high value cargo or perishable cargo that might need just extra speed.
Sure.
But majority of trucking is done by a solo driver who is going to depart, say, Dallas on their way to New York. They're going to need to drive, I'll just say in ideal circumstances at first, they're going to drive 11 hours. It's going to take them somewhere near Nashville from Dallas. They're going to pull over roadside and they're going to take their rest break there. They're going to be sleeping in a cramped cab in the back of their tractor. And then the next day, they're going to continue another 11 hours, assuming there's no traffic.
And rest break is 13 hours long if they drive 11 hours, so they can rest for.
Yeah. Or if other reasons they're on duty for 14 hours, they'd have 10 hours for a rest break. So then they get somewhere near Pittsburgh, pull over again the second night. The next day, they complete their load, drop it off in New York. Their next load is not likely to bring them back to Dallas. And so they're going to take another load that leads them to another town. They're going to be ping-ponging around the country for weeks at a time before they get a paid load that takes them back to home, where they might spend, a couple of days recovering, hopefully seeing their friends, their pet, their families before they're back out on the road for another extended period of time.
So you mean to tell me that the average trucker, of which, and you said the 90% of the space is run by like 6 truck firms
and
or smaller.
Mm-hmm.
And so like if I'm a solo operator and I take a rig and I drive it from Dallas to New York and drop it off, then I can't make it so that I'm picking up something to go back to Dallas?
No.
You can try. If you have a really good broker, you can. Or if you have a really good dispatcher. But most of these guys are not able to find something that brings them back to their home. So there are like tri-haul concept where they would go from Dallas to New York to Chicago, and then from Chicago to Dallas again.
Yeah.
Or they would, if they can find it. If not, then they'll be just on the road until, they can find something back.
So it's almost like luck of the draw.
It is.
Yeah, it
and
is.
anywhere where there are consistent, dedicated routes that will bring you home on a more frequent basis, those are highly coveted and go to the people with the most seniority, and there are very few of them.
Yeah.
So the other thing is that I talked about the ideal circumstances where you can just drive through 11 hours, no traffic. Most truck drivers are paid by the mile.
Yeah.
So anytime that they're stuck in traffic, stuff at the loading dock, they are not getting paid for that time. They have a truck breakdown, like that's really expensive for them. Then we'll also say that one of the huge pain point for truck drivers is detention time. That's when you drive to the dock. The folks there are supposed to like either load you up or take the load out of your trailer. Really, I think the kind of the industry norm, you would hope that can take like, 30 to 40 minutes, but kind of the basic status quo, okay amount of time is maybe 2 hours, but that can get stretched out to 4 hours, 6 hours. And that's time that they're not paid. And then it eats the time out of their duty hours. So if they have 14 hours to be on duty and 4 of them were spent at the dock, then that cuts into their daily pay as well.
So even if they're sitting in that truck and it's not moving an inch, that's counted as time.
Yeah. And they have no control.
Wow.
Yeah. So as soon as they log in for duty, that the time starts and their 14-hour clock starts. And if they can drive, say, only 10 hours, that 1 hour was eaten away, then they are losing, say, if they drive 50 miles, 60 miles in an hour, they're losing about, $100, $150 just because, they were just sitting there.
Then let's talk about where they park for that night. So truck parking is a huge issue in our country. The safe place, you might have occasionally noticed trucks parked on the off-ramp.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So those are cases where they reach the end of their hour, like they get violations. They can get, it's against their record if they drive beyond those hours. So they may have only made it to that off ramp and that's where they need to spend the night. But also because of a lack of truck parking, they may not have a safe place to be, and like theft and truck hijackings. I don't know if that's the correct word for it, actually.
Yeah, that does happen. And also Desiree told us that sometimes they would spend an hour just finding a spot finding an available spot. And that is just
I've seen trucks and I always wonder, why is that truck sitting there? Now it makes perfect sense. I understand.
Yeah.
So,
and it's not safe for them. And it's not safe for regular passenger cars.
Sure.
Because,
absolutely.
Or the cargo.
Yeah. Okay. So now we come to this whole idea of freight relay, because obviously you guys have come up with an elegant solution for truckers worldwide, right? Or at least nationwide. So tell us a little bit about the concept of the relay model for long haul trucking and how you feel like it will revolutionize the industry.
Yeah. So the beauty of the relay model is based entirely on the network structure that we have in the United States, the interstate structure.
Yeah.
On busy interstates, there is enough trucks that are moving in opposite directions that you don't have to. So if you're a Dallas-based trucker, you don't actually have to go all the way to Chicago to deliver a cargo. You can go up to Tulsa or up to, say, Northwest Arkansas, drop off the trailer here, and then take some other trailer that is supposed to go to Dallas from here, while the driver who is based out in Northwest Arkansas can take it forward, and you can, share the revenue, but you are still local driver that is based in Dallas, and you have, a decent work-life balance there.
And that's one of those things is like, if you ever notice, like on the highway, you'll see like advertisements on the back of trucks where it says, our drivers sleep in their own beds at night. Yeah. And that's like a big deal.
It's a huge deal.
It's a huge deal.
So we're talking about, you can think the Pony Express from, the 18th century in the United States, or a relay race with the batons. Sure. We're talking about, rather than having one driver leave Dallas, go to New York, all the way, taking all these breaks away from home, we're talking about freight relay technology, pooling the loads moving in either direction and matching trucks and drivers in such a way that a Dallas-based driver can drive about half of their hours of service, say 5 hours eastward, and then meet up with a driver coming from, if you've got nodes A, B, C, D, and E, driver at A meets driver from C at point B. They exchange trailers so that they have fully loaded paid loads going back home. And they just keep passing it on. When you do this, you get drivers home to their domicile, their communities, sleeping in their beds at the end of each shift. Turns it into a shift localized job, much like nursing. But you also, when you are switching loads in this way, your cargo and your trailer are not resting roadside for 10 to 13 hours out of the day. So they continue moving. On a Dallas to New York truck lane, you can move in 50% of the time. Dallas, Chicago, there's only one sleep break. And so that's 20% of the savings. So goods are moving faster, but then also you're doubling your asset utilization because that truck is not resting anymore. It can be productive. The trailer just keeps moving from driver to driver. And for the tractor portion, whether you're an owner operator that has a trusted buddy who you are switching shifts with the truck, when one person's shift ends, the next person goes out, or you are a company that has a whole fleet and you're just substituting different drivers, you get double the asset utilization. We're also talking about eliminating the emissions created during the idle time that those drivers are resting and they're trying to keep themselves cool in the heat of summer or warm in the cold of winter. So we're talking about emissions reduction. And actually, this network system is perfect for actual deployment of green fleets in the future, which right now, any hydrogen fuel cell or electric heavy-duty vehicle out there is limited to local and regional trucking because the battery life. And then we can even say that there's rural economic development opportunities too.
Oh, man. So you guys have kind of have it all figured out with this, and it's called Freight Relay. That's the company. And essentially, the patent that you created, is it the algorithm behind this that kind of connects the dots? Because even my head is kind of like it's hurting thinking about how would I connect the dots of all these different trucks going in all these disparate positions, right? It's the same issue that one truck driver that we talked about going to New York, he's got to ping pong around the country until he finally gets a haul that takes him back to Dallas.
Yeah.
But now what you're saying through your software and through the algorithm that you've created with Freight Relay, you don't have to do that. You can sleep in your own bed at night, but you can work. It's more like working a normal shift, and you're handing it off to another trusted partner within this ecosystem that then will take it and run with it.
Mm-hmm.
So with that said, that ecosystem, what are you trying to do right now in terms of getting people to adopt the algorithm and the software that you're offering?
Yeah, so for that, we're really blessed to be in Northwest Arkansas. We are working with our partner here who has been very helpful. They are a big broker here in Arkansas, and they have been very helpful in terms of getting...
I mean, it helps to have one of the biggest logistics companies in the world right here, right?
Correct.
So,
Definitely.
Yeah. So
they have helped us understand the landscape, the intricacies of, the operate, because we are a software company in essence, and it's on them to work with us in terms of figuring out how this model will work within their trucking operation.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where we are today. And we are also, with the grants that we have received, so we have received 2 grants from U.S. Department of Agriculture.
Congrats.
And that, thanks. And that's about $750,000 in total. That plus we have received grants from Department of Energy, National Science Foundation, and also from the state of Arkansas. So everyone is seeing the need for something like this in the market. And because we feel like if we change the way trucking is done, the secondary effects of that would be humongous in terms of, rural employment, emissions reductions, and future-looking technologies. They are interested in investing in us right now. So we have raised, I think, $1.5 million in non-dilutive equity so far, and we are probably going to get about $1.1 million more this year to further expand on this. But coming back to what we are doing today is we are working on a pilot with our partner here in Northwest Arkansas. We will deploy for a limited time, 2 weeks. We'll deploy a relay model on one of their lanes that they are comfortable with letting us do, because there's a bunch of logistics that needs to be worked out, like, one trucking company handing off trailer to some other trucking company, and there's an insurance requirement around it, and, so a bunch of stuff that complications,
regulations and stuff like that. I got you.
So we can be in a la la land and design a software, but when it comes down to going through the regulations, they need to make sure it's working. So we are hoping that we do a good pilot this year. We are able to prove things out, and then hopefully we become or we are able to develop an operational model in trucking that these companies can now then take and run with using our software as a base.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like you really just have to get a few early adopters to buy into what Freight Relay is all about. And that as they start to do that, other people will take notice. And, it's kind of like, oh, I want what they have. That makes it so much easier. Now they're having a much easier time, because I would imagine, and I've seen the ads for it, but recruiting truckers is not easy. But if you can recruit truckers to a company where you can promise them or guarantee that they can sleep in their own beds at night, I mean, again, like I said, that is a huge benefit. So I would only imagine that you have to feel like it's just a matter of time for this to take on and for it to kind of build a life of its own.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then there's, of course, issues that we need to work out with our model too. There's an efficacy issue, like how effective is it? We are promising things 20%, 50% more efficient. Is it actually going to translate in real dollars for them? And I don't think it would exactly, but it would be some savings, what those savings are. Because since if you want to think of it, it's kind of a mathematical optimization problem. We are taking one lane, we are trying to put 50 shipments on it daily or loads on it daily. We are breaking those shipments down into 5. So we are now creating, 250 pieces, and then we have 50 drivers to deal with. So it's a lot of optimization that will happen real time. And that's why based on our NSF project, we developed a machine learning model that allows us to predict things based on historical data. So we are trying to do it in a way that it's not a burden on any adopter. They just click and it works for them. And that's where the whole groundwork that we are doing right now comes in.
And I would say that, so we can, in modeling, there comes back to this ideal scenario. We could say, yes, we're going to have 20% or 50% savings of shipping time if everything worked normally. But I would say that these algorithms that Ayush has developed for the matching and coordinating and everything, that is kind of the easy part of, not for me, but for him. The hard part is those machine learning, the modules that he's creating for dealing with everyday trucking operations that don't go the ideal way. It's late drivers, equipment breakdowns, load is not ready when you get to the dock, weather, all of that stuff is the hard part. And so that, I think, is technically the most difficult part of this, is how do we predict them and mitigate? And if they're not predictable, either case, we're going to need to mitigate them. So
you're trying to predict the unpredictable.
Exactly.
It's very difficult. So, but if you can even get something that gets you 80% of the way there, I think you're probably doing something successful. So this is really exciting. So based on this, what are some of, how has your experience been coming here to Northwest Arkansas with this business? You could have theoretically stayed in Tennessee. You could have maybe decided to go to another place. But why Northwest Arkansas, and what has Northwest Arkansas meant for you as a business founder?
So I think what we are trying to do is change how trucking operates. And we realized, after spending some time in Memphis, that would be possible if we go after the real big players who, if they see the value, they have the volume first to see the financial benefits of this. And second, they can set the playground or a different playing field, and they can actually make the transition, or I won't say transition from the current model, but I would say adoption of this new kind of operational model. Bring it and make it, I would say put their stamp of approval on it, and then it becomes adoptable by everyone across the country. And if you are looking at long haul trucking, Northwest Arkansas is the place for it to be. There's Walmart, J.B. Hunt, Tyson, just humongous companies, ArcBest, Watco Logistics, and then there is PAM Transportation. Everyone is here.
UBF.
Everyone is here, and it just made sense for us to be close to all the trucking folks, so that if we first run into issues with understanding the model, because we are on the tech side of things, we are not on the operation side. So understanding that is helpful. Second, if we work with them and build it with them, then it would be much easier for us to sell to them.
Right.
And that's kind of the motivation what brought us here. But, in terms of the community here, it's been awesome. So I'll let you
So I'll say that Startup Junkie was also responsible for raising our awareness about Northwest Arkansas through their Fuel Accelerator program. In 2020, we were part of that cohort. They were focused on AI and artificial intelligence and machine learning technology startups. And thanks to Edwin Ortiz from Rejoicey for introducing us to Startup Junkie and the Fuel program, we left Memphis for this program, packed all of our apartment into a storage unit, and said, if Bentonville turns out to be, we had come for the tech summit previous to the program. But we were like, if this turns out to be the right place to be, then we're going to relocate our headquarters here. And that's what we did. I will say that the timing was, 6 weeks into the Fuel program is when COVID hit. It kind of
talk about impeccable timing.
It really was.
That was such a bummer.
But it kind of cut off our access to the enterprises that Startup Junkie was introducing us to at that moment, because they were all in survival mode. But then we were able to, kind of reset our objectives for the near future and start engaging with company like Startup Junkie, but also not companies, organizations like the Arkansas Small Business Technology Development Center, Apex, Arkansas Apex Accelerator, Science Venture Studio. Just the number of entrepreneurial support organizations out there has been incredible. And then just a lot of really welcoming people. So it's the enterprises, it's the support organizations, and just kind of the culture of welcoming startups.
So can I ask you a question? And this is just a shameless plug for Northwest Arkansas. But since you've been out there in other places, how would you say we, being Northwest Arkansas, ranks in terms of having such great opportunities to grow a business, to grow an idea?
So I would kind of be we moved here from Memphis. We still have friends there. So we don't want to be banished there.
Yeah, of course not.
But the thing is that for our company, for our industry in the space we are in, we felt like this was an amazing place for us to be. Just, in terms of our progress, in 2020, we were 2 unpaid founders. And now we have a team of 5 people here. In 4-year time period, we have an office space, and we are actually, working and trying to deploy this. And we have, I would say we had no legs back then. Now we have some legs. And hopefully, we can start walking someday.
Yeah.
Just that piece has been amazing. And like Demi said, I would echo that too, that the community is just so welcoming, and it's just been an amazing experience throughout.
And we have so many accelerators. We have so many programs. It's like every time I turn around, there's a different program for something. So whether it's freight, whether it's you're creating the next great outdoor product to use outdoors and outdoor adventures, we have something for you here. That's the crazy thing. Or it could be a consumer product, a consumer goods product. I mean, there's so much opportunity here right in your own in your own backyard in Northwest Arkansas. So I'm always excited to see how well everybody plays in the sandbox when it comes to that, right? It's not like a super competition. It's just like, hey, if you can help Freight Relay, right? And then somebody else will come along and be like, yeah, we got this. We're going to take you this next step, right? And so there seems to be individuals and organizations that are here to kind of walk with you along this path as you continue to grow. Is that a fair statement?
Oh, yeah, definitely. And I think we are seeing Northwest Arkansas rub on us too, because this year, just a month ago, Demi became a mentor to Asian businesses or businesses started by people of Asian origin.
It's a AAPI Achieve program through the Venture Center.
In Little Rock. And then
congratulations.
Thank you.
That's nice.
And a few weeks ago, through the Arkansas Association of Asian Businesses, we worked with Entrepreneurship for All, Rodrigo Salas. I don't know if you know him.
I do.
So he's just a phenomenal guy on his own. But
everybody that you've mentioned has been on this podcast.
So we organized this pitch competition, or the first kind of intro event for the pitch competition focused on entrepreneurs of Asian origin. So
and that's coming up soon, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I think you guys got several $1,000s that are going to be eligible for people pitching for that.
Exactly. So. And that, as a plug for that, the deadline is May 2nd to apply for the pitch competition, and the pitch will happen on the 16th, I think.
Okay. Well, this episode will be out after May 2nd, but we'll be sure to I actually shared out the E for All post about that. So that will definitely get the word out. But man, you guys are really doing it though. So we're so glad that you're here in Northwest Arkansas, that you've decided to make this your home. And now, we're not going to let you leave. So we'll be in the future. We'll be talking about the fact that this is the home of Freight Relay, right? That's the thing. So, anything that you want to share before we close out?
Just that, I guess, I'm just really, really grateful. We're trying to pay it forward as much as we can for different things, because we feel like we've just benefited so much from this community.
Yeah,
and it's exciting to. After 4 years of living here, there's still so much that we don't know about, and so much too, just listening to your podcast, learning about other organizations, businesses, and whatnot out there. So just grateful to be a part of this community.
Well, we are certainly grateful to have you here, Demi, and you, Ayush, here in Northwest Arkansas. Can't wait to see what the next stage is for Freight Relay. If anybody wants to get in contact with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
LinkedIn.
I'll put posts on LinkedIn for you. Both have profiles on LinkedIn.
Okay. So we are most active on LinkedIn, and then email wise, It's Ayush at Freight Relay, FR8 relay.
Right.
So I should also say
Yes.
Ayush.
Ayush. Yes. And I'll put that in the show notes.
Excellent.
So yeah, it's not a problem. But the website is FR8relay's.com, but it's freight FR8, the number 8, and then the word relay.com. So, and we'll put that in the show notes too as well. They've got the coolest logos. So you definitely, and Ayush is wearing a really funky t-shirt today with the logo on it. So I'm a little jealous, but that's, I mean, it's nice. And so we'll make sure that everybody listening to this will have access to that information. Should you want to reach out to them, should you want to connect with them. If you are a closet developer that had some ideas along these lines and you want to reach out to Ayush, I'm sure he'd be happy to talk with you, because there are always going to be opportunities to continue to expand in this arena.
And we are hiring too.
Oh,
so
okay.
We are hiring a developer right now.
Okay.
Looking for one. And then about this shirt, this was the first shirt Demi made by herself. So
she did a good job. She did a good job. So congratulations.
So it's kind of getting old now.
Yeah, it's a bit worn.
Yeah, it's okay. It's all right. Well, that's going to have a little cachet to it, and it's going to have some real value. So somebody will end up selling it on eBay one day. You know, when you guys are on the NASDAQ 500. So yeah, I love that.
It's been an awesome journey for us.
That's good. That's good. Well, listen, we wish you guys nothing but continued success. So keep doing what you're doing, and keep us posted on how things continue to go and grow. And we certainly are excited to share your journey on the podcast. And one day when you guys are on MSNBC and CNBC, really, I'll be able to call you up and say, hey, remember we did that podcast a long time ago? Can I have an interview now? And hopefully you'll say yes. So we'll see how it goes. So, well, Demi, Ayush, thank you guys so much for joining us today on the podcast. We really, really appreciate it. We wish you nothing but success. Certainly, as I said, we'll encourage everybody to check out the show notes to learn more about what Demi and Ayush are doing with FreightRelay.com. So thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Randy. Absolutely. Well, folks, that's another episode of the I Am Northwest Arkansas podcast. To learn more about us or to read or download the show notes from today's episode, visit IamNorthwestArkansas.com. You can listen to this podcast and sign up for our free newsletter to keep up with us and all things NWA. Sign up today. You can follow the I Am Northwest Arkansas podcast wherever you listen to it, whatever platform, Spotify. We're on YouTube now. You know, it doesn't matter. But of course, our preference is Apple Podcasts. I'm an Apple homer, so just, you can blame me later for that. But we would love it if you would consider rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts or your podcast player of choice. Remember, our podcast comes out every Monday, rain or shine. I'm your host, Randy Wilburn, and we'll see you back here next week for another new episode of the I Am Northwest Arkansas podcast. Peace.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of I Am Northwest Arkansas. Check us out each and every week, available anywhere that great podcasts can be found. For show notes or more information on becoming a guest, visit IamNorthwestArkansas.com. We'll see you next week on I Am Northwest Arkansas.